Hello, hello. It's Eileen here, and I've got a quick update that I wanted to be sure to share with you before we dive into today's episode. The Resilience Room membership community is going to open its doors for new members Monday, July 28th through Friday, August 1st. If you've been thinking of joining us and want to be sure to be notified when we open, I want to encourage you to join the waitlist. You can do that at go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. That's go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. We only open our doors for new members a few times per year, so if you've been thinking about joining, this is a great time for you to do that. We would love nothing more than to welcome you into our amazing community. So again, you can find all the details and join the waitlist at go.eileendivine.com/resilience room. Okay, on to the episode. They described how the morning would completely fall apart. So he would roll around on the floor, yelling sometimes. Other times he'd run back to his bed and he'd pull the covers over his head. They would have to physically pull him back out of the bed. They would understandably grow more frustrated and more desperate because they see that time is ticking away and he's going to be late for school again. They're going to be late for work again. And so then they'd get louder and they'd threaten him with consequences. And they see that that did nothing to move him towards the goal of getting dressed on his own. Hi there, and welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and I am a therapist, parent coach, and educator who supports parents that are raising children, teens, and young adults with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms. If you are a parent or caregiver of a child who has intense, confusing, relentless, or sometimes even scary behaviors, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and today we are going to talk about a very common fear that I hear articulated in one way or another by many parents that I've supported over the years. It is the fear that if they fully lean into parenting from a brain first lens, and fully accommodating their child or teen, and they adjust expectations, sometimes pretty significantly, to be more in alignment with where their child is in terms of their cognitive skills, that they are actually then preventing their child from growing and developing. It's a fear that they are over-accommodating their child or maybe enabling them, and they're not doing their job as a parent. That's the fear. Things like teaching their kids how to do hard things or grow in skills that are maybe hard, but they need to learn. They're afraid that they're not helping them mature. And in fact, their fear is that they're getting in the way of that maturation process. It is such a common concern. So if you've had that little voice or maybe even a louder voice in your head saying, I don't know, do they really need this much support? Am I doing too much for them here? Then I will say you are definitely not alone and that this episode was created for you. I want to begin by taking a small step back and reminding ourselves of why we provide accommodations to our kids and our teens in the first place. So your child or teen lives with a brain-based difference of some kind. This means that their brain works differently. They're lagging behind their peers in essential cognitive skills that they and actually all of us need to get through our day without having this constant feeling of stress and overwhelm. Now, the brain is a physical part of our body, and anyone who lives with a physical difference of any kind needs and deserves accommodations. So for your child or your teen who lives with a brain that works differently, this means providing them with scaffolded support or accommodations that are specific to those lagging cognitive skills. These accommodations are the path towards less challenging behavioral symptoms. They are essential for your child's success in terms of their ability to navigate their various environments. They're as essential as a wheelchair ramp is for the child who has a disability that requires them to be bound to a wheelchair and needs that ramp to navigate that environment. Once your child or teen can navigate their world more successfully because they now have that essential support in place, they experience less overwhelm, less anxiety, less irritability, and all the other challenging behavioral symptoms that they are so prone to. So that's why we spend so much time talking about accommodations when we are parenting our kids from a brain first lens. Now, in my experience, the parents that I've worked with over the years, they can pretty quickly get on board with that foundational understanding. They begin seeing their child's lagging skills for what they are. They begin implementing more accommodations and things get better, meaning the intensity and the frequency of those challenging behavioral symptoms are on the decline. And that is a wonderful thing. But then at some point, many of these parents hit this point where, for a variety of understandable reasons, they bump up against this internal resistance to fully accommodating their child it's typically in a specific area or with a specific task. They become fearful that they are over-accommodating, and that by over-accommodating their child or their teen, that child will never grow and never learn that skill on their own because things are always being done for them. Or in some cases, maybe an expectation has been removed completely. So I want to use a basic example that just came up in my work last week with parents. It actually is what made me think, I should record a podcast episode on this topic. This couple has a 10-year-old son, and through our work, they came to realize that he has a lot of lagging skills that they just didn't see before, no fault of their own, but now they see it. Before they saw his behavior as willful defiance, now they see, man, he has a lot of lagging skills that need pretty intensive accommodations. But the one area that they really struggled with in terms of fully accommodating him was helping their 10-year-old son get dressed each morning from start to finish. So laying out the clothes for him, physically helping him get out of his pajamas, physically helping him put each arm and leg through the clothes that he needed to put on for the day. I'm talking every single aspect of this seemingly easy task is something that their son really needed help with. And they had so much resistance towards helping him to this extent, to this degree. So I asked them, what happens when you tell him just to get dressed on his own, like you would a neurotypical 10-year-old? And then he doesn't do it. And so then what happens next? And they described how the morning would completely fall apart from there. So he would roll around on the floor, yelling sometimes. Other times he'd run back to his bed and he'd pull the covers over his head. They would have to physically pull him back out of the bed. They would understandably grow more frustrated and more desperate because they see that time is ticking away and he's going to be late for school again. They're going to be late for work again. And so then they'd get louder and they'd threaten him with consequences. And they see that that did nothing to move him towards the goal of getting dressed on his own. And so when I asked them, why did they think they were experiencing such internal resistance to helping him get dressed from start to finish? One of his parents said, well, he's 10. How is he ever going to learn how to do new things or push through hard things if we're always doing everything for him, like getting dressed in the morning when he's 10 years old? Their resistance was rooted in fear. Fear for their son's future, that if he needed this level of help for such a small and easy task, like what was middle school going to look like? How was he going to survive high school? And oh my goodness, like how was he going to be an adult functioning in the real world? What is that going to look like for him? It was also rooted in fear that they weren't doing a good job as his parents. If they didn't teach him to push through hard things, then they weren't doing their job. And you know what? I get it. It's so common to have those fears when you have a child or a teen who needs so much intensive support for simple, everyday tasks. So, to hopefully alleviate or at least lessen some of those fears, if those resonate with you and sound familiar, I want to talk about how we all learn. How do we learn to do new things or hard things? How do we learn to push through when things get tricky, right? We learn and grow and mature when we feel settled in our environment and when we have a sense of felt safety, meaning at this physiological level in our nervous system, we perceive safety instead of threat. Anytime we are under a great deal of stress, our nervous system is on edge and our thinking brain starts to go offline. We are moving outside of our window of tolerance. So this means that we can't think very well. We're way more unreasonable. We say things that we regret later. We don't have access to the cognitive skills that we would have access to if we were supported and if our thinking brain was online. So easy tasks feel way harder and more stressful for us. If you've ever had a terrible supervisor who didn't give you, as their employee, the support that you needed to do your job, you know how this feels. You probably didn't do your best work. And it's not because you are lazy or weren't a good employee. It's because you weren't given the support you needed to get the job done. And someone was constantly telling you that you needed to do better. If we feel supported, then we feel safe. Then our thinking brain is online and we can access those higher level thinking skills. We can be logical. We can be reasonable. Everything is so much easier. That is also when our capacity to learn is at its greatest. We are within our window of tolerance. So we're able to take in new information, we're able to use that information and integrate it into our behavior, and we grow in our skills. This is all true for your child or your teen too, but it is more extreme because they are fragile, right? From this neurobiological standpoint, they have a brain that works differently. They have a narrow window of tolerance and a fragile nervous system. Simple skills are really hard for them, even on a good day. And when they have that fragile nervous system, that narrow window of tolerance at baseline, if things start to get tricky for them, they have a task or an expectation that requires a skill that's difficult for them, then that is going to make it even harder. So the 10-year-old who already has a hard time transitioning, say, from sleep to wake every morning and is anticipating another school day, which is always hard and always stressful for him, he will have a diminished capacity to do other things that he needs support for on a good day, like getting dressed independently. But when he's fully accommodated, then he experiences more felt safety. He has more steadiness in his nervous system. He stays within his window of tolerance. He's less stressed. He's less overwhelmed. And this is the point at which he has more capacity to learn and grow in his skills. Those skills like getting dressed in the morning. So accommodations are not stunting growth. They're not getting in the way of growth. They are the very thing that promotes it. If you are like so many parents I've worked with who have this fear that we've been talking about, this fear that fully accommodating your child or teen to the level and intensity that they need will stunt their growth or their ability to learn, I get it. It comes from such a loving place of wanting what's best for them and wanting to be the best parent you can, setting them up for success. But here's the thing. I have seen so many parents waste a lot of time and a lot of precious energy getting stuck in that place. And I don't want that for you. So this is what I'll leave you with today. If you find yourself feeling like you are over accommodating your child or your teen, you have that little voice that's nagging at you saying you're doing too much for them. Is this really necessary? You're probably in the right place in terms of giving them the level of support that they need. Now, why do I say this? Because most of us are so deeply entrenched in a behavioral lens by no fault of our own. So we have assumed for so long that our kids can do it, they just don't want to, right? That it's about will. Now we're shifting our lens and we're seeing, oh, wow, no, this is skill-based. This is about their brain-based difference and their lagging cognitive skills. And with that realization, we need the pendulum to swing the other direction. More than a little bit usually, right? From that behavioral lens over to a brain first lens. You will begin to see your child settle. You'll begin to see their skills and their capabilities grow slowly over time. And then you'll know, okay, wow, I see some growth here. They still need my support, but maybe a little less, maybe not as intensely. And then you adjust accordingly. And that's how it goes. Know that I'm always rooting for you as you work to navigate this parenting experience, the parenting of your precious and also very complex child. Hey, I was hoping I could ask for a really quick favor before we say goodbye. If you enjoy this podcast and you find the information that I have to share valuable to you as a parent or a provider, I would really appreciate if you took just a few minutes to provide this podcast with a 5-star review and a quick comment with how this information has positively impacted you. It is the number one way for me to reach more parents like you and I, that could really use some hope and some support as they continue to do their best to parent their child who lives with a brain-based difference and challenging behavioral symptoms. Thanks so much.